When people see me standing on this stage today, dressed in a clean suit and speaking with confidence, they often assume I've always had it together. They see success, not the story behind it. But what they don't see is the man I once was, broken, betrayed, and living on the streets with nothing but regret in my heart and a torn photograph in my pocket. My name is Michael, and this is the story of how I lost everything. My home, my marriage, my hope, and how a single question from a stranger changed my life forever. It all began the day my marriage ended. You know, when you give your heart to someone, you never imagine the day it will be thrown back at you like a piece of trash. We'd been married for 9 years. I thought we were happy. We had plans, dreams, a life we built together from scratch. I worked long nights at a construction company, saving every penny to buy her the home she always wanted. And when I finally did, I thought I'd achieved something. But I was wrong. It started small. Late-night texts, secret calls, distant smiles. You can feel it when love begins to fade. The warmth turns into silence, and silence becomes a wall. I tried to reach her through that wall, but she had already built another life on the other side. One evening I came home early from work. A heavy rainstorm had shut down the site. I wanted to surprise her. I did surprise her, but not in the way I expected. There she was in our kitchen, with another man. My best friend Mark. The man who was supposed to be like a brother to me. At that moment, everything inside me shattered. I stood there frozen while they both looked at me like I was the intruder in my own house. No shouting, no fighting, just silence. The kind of silence that burns louder than screams. I didn't even have the strength to ask why. I just walked out, leaving everything behind. In the weeks that followed, I lost more than just my wife. I lost my will to fight. Depression is a silent thief. It steals not just your happiness, but your identity. I stopped showing up for work. Bills piled up. Eviction notices came. Eventually, I found myself standing on the sidewalk with a bag full of clothes and nowhere to go. Homelessness doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in like fog. One day you're struggling, the next day you're invisible. People walk past you like you don't exist. Rain becomes your roof and hunger your constant companion. I slept under bridges, behind old buildings, sometimes in bus stations. The city lights that once gave me hope now only reminded me of everything I'd lost. There were nights when I'd look up at the stars and ask God why he'd forgotten me. I'd whisper, "If you're real, give me a reason to keep going." But for months, there was no answer. Only the cold wind and the sound of passing cars. I tried finding work, any work. But without an address, no one wanted to hire me. Without a shower, no one wanted to talk to me. One day I went to a diner and asked the owner if I could sweep floors for food. He looked at me, hesitated, then threw me a half sandwich and said, "You're scaring my customers. Leave." That night I sat behind the dumpster of that same diner, eating that sandwich like it was gold. I could have cried, not because of hunger, but because I realized how far I had fallen. Then came the night that changed everything. It was freezing. The kind of cold that bites through layers and makes your bones ache. I was sitting outside a gas station hugging myself, trying to stay awake. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. A car pulled up, a black Mercedes, shiny and new. The door opened and a man stepped out wearing a long coat. He looked at me for a long moment. I looked away. I'd grown used to that look, the one that mixes pity and disgust. Then he said something that made my heart skip a beat. He said, "Excuse me, are you Michael?" For a second I thought I'd imagined it. Nobody called me by my name anymore. I looked up slowly and said, Yeah. Who's asking? He smiled, a strange mix of relief and disbelief in his eyes. Sir, I've been looking for you for months, he said. My name is Daniel. I work for a law firm in Chicago. You need to come with me. You've just inherited $47 million. I laughed. I thought he was crazy. You've got the wrong guy, I said. Look at me. Do I look like someone who'd inherit anything? But he handed me a folder with my full name, date of birth, and a letter. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a copy of a will. My father's name was on it. A man I hadn't seen since I was 10 years old. He had left me everything. At first, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a cruel prank. But the documents were real. The signatures, the stamps, all of it. My father, who had abandoned my mother and me decades ago, had built a business empire overseas. And before he died, he searched for me, the son he had left behind, and left everything to me. When Daniel took me to the law office to finalize the papers, I couldn't stop shaking. My hands were cracked and dirty, but they were about to sign ownership of something beyond imagination. $47 million. You'd think that kind of money would instantly heal everything, but it didn't. When you've been broken for so long, even blessings feel heavy. I didn't know what to do with it. For days, I just sat in a hotel room staring at the ceiling, wondering why me. The media got hold of the story. Homeless man inherits $47 million. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know me. Reporters, old friends, even my ex-wife. Yes, can her. She called me 2 weeks later. I still remember that number flashing on my phone. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. But curiosity won. Michael. It's me, she said, her voice soft, rehearsed. I heard about what happened. I'm so happy for you. I know we had our differences, but I never stopped caring. I could almost hear her smile through the phone. I wanted to believe her. A part of me still loved her, the old her, the one I used to dream with. But another part of me remembered that night in the kitchen. She asked if we could meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted revenge. When she walked into the cafe, she looked perfect, like life had treated her kindly. She sat across from me, her eyes searching mine. You look different, she said. I should, I replied. Money changes everything, doesn't it? She laughed nervously. Michael, I made mistakes. I know that. But we can start over. We were good together once. Her words were sweet, too sweet. And just as she reached for my hand, I saw it. A familiar gold bracelet. The same one I had once saved up 3 months' salary to buy her. The same one she had pawned off to run away with Mark. I pulled my hand back and said quietly, You're not here for me, you're here for the money. She froze. Her face fell. That's not true. I interrupted her. Do you even know what it's like to sleep on concrete? To have people walk over you like trash? To have no one? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were real. You made your choice, Sarah. And now I'm making mine. I stood up, left a $100 bill on the table, and walked out. That moment I realized something. Money can buy you comfort, but not peace. Peace comes when you forgive yourself for trusting the wrong people and start building the life you deserve. But the story didn't end there. Life had one more twist waiting for me. A month later, I received a letter from the same law firm. Inside was a note from my father, a letter he'd written before he died. It said, My son, I know I failed you. I was young, proud, and afraid. I left not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't know how to be a father. If you're reading this, it means I've left you what I built. Not as payment, but as a chance to build something better than I did. Use it to heal, not to hate. Those words broke me in a way nothing else ever had. I cried. Not tears of pain, but of release. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't forgotten after all. So I made a promise. I would use that inheritance not to live in luxury, but to change lives. The lives of people who felt as invisible as I once did. I started a foundation, a shelter for the homeless with free meals, job training, and counseling. I hired people who were once like me, broken, but not beyond repair. Every night I'd sit with them, listen to their stories, and remind them, you're not a mistake. You're a miracle waiting to happen. The day the shelter opened, I stood outside and watched a young man walk in, barefoot, trembling, clutching an old backpack. He looked at me and said, "Sir, can I just get some food?" I smiled and said, "Of course. You're home now." As he walked in, I realized I had become the man I once needed, the stranger who reached out when the world turned away. They say life is full of circles. Maybe that's true. Maybe we fall just to rise higher than before. But if there's one thing I learned through all this, it's that you don't need millions to find meaning. You just need the courage to keep walking when life knocks you down. People often ask me if I ever saw my ex-wife or Mark again. The truth is, life has a strange way of bringing you face to face with the ghosts you think you've buried. A year after the shelter opened, I was invited to speak at a charity event downtown. The mayor was there, along with business leaders and donors. I stood on that stage telling my story, not for sympathy, but to remind people that behind every homeless face is a story worth saving. As I finished, I noticed two people at the back of the room. They looked familiar, painfully familiar. Sarah and Mark. For a moment, time froze. My chest tightened, memories flooding back like an old wound reopening. They stood there awkwardly, unsure whether to approach me. I could see guilt in their eyes, maybe regret, maybe shame. After the event, I walked off stage and headed toward them. Mark was the first to speak. "Michael, man, it's been a long time." His voice trembled slightly. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, a lifetime it feels like." Sarah looked down, her hands fidgeting with her purse. "We heard what you've done," she said softly. "The shelter, the programs, it's incredible." I could feel the sincerity in her tone, but part of me still guarded my heart. Pain doesn't vanish just because you've healed. It leaves scars, reminders of what you survived. Mark stepped closer. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. What we did to you was unforgivable. I don't expect you to forget, but I had to say it." I looked at him. Really looked at him. He didn't look like the confident man I once knew. He looked older, worn out, like life had taken its toll on him too. For a moment I thought about all the nights I spent hating him. The anger, the bitterness. But standing there I realized something powerful. Forgiveness isn't about letting others off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of your past, so I said, "You don't owe me an apology. You owe it to yourself. Because hate is heavy, Mark." And I carried it long enough. His eyes welled up and he nodded. Sarah stepped forward and whispered, "You've changed, Michael." I smiled faintly. Pain changes people. But it doesn't have to destroy them. They left quietly and I never saw them again. But that night I walked out into the cold and looked up at the same sky that once felt so empty. It didn't look empty anymore. It looked full of second chances. That encounter taught me something vital. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It rewrites your future. A few months later, the shelter began expanding. Donations poured in. We opened 3 more centers across the state, helping hundreds find homes and jobs. The media loved the homeless man turned millionaire story. But that was never the point. One night I was at the shelter kitchen serving food when a little boy tugged at my sleeve. "Sir," he said, "are you the man who used to live on the street?" I chuckled. Yeah, that was me. He looked up, his eyes wide. Then maybe my dad can be like you someday. He's out there right now trying to get clean. That one sentence broke me open. I knelt down and said, "You tell your dad that every fall is just a setup for a greater rise. You hear me?" He nodded, smiling through missing teeth. That night I sat in my office alone and cried, not out of sadness but gratitude. Because in that boy's hope I saw my purpose come full circle. For the first time I wasn't running from my past. I was using it to light the way for others. Years passed. The foundation grew into something far beyond what I imagined. But despite all the success, I never forgot the man I once was when hungry, lost, broken. That memory kept me grounded. Every week I'd still walk the streets at night, handing out food and blankets, talking to the people most of the world ignored. One night I met a man sitting against a wall, shivering. His face was bruised, his clothes torn. I handed him a blanket and asked, "What's your name?" He looked up, eyes tired. "David," he said. "Where are you from, David?" "Nowhere," he replied quietly. I sat beside him. "You know, I used to be nowhere too." He turned his head, studying me. You don't look like it." I smiled faintly. That's the thing about broken people. Sometimes when they heal, they shine so bright you can't see the cracks anymore. He chuckled, shaking his head. Man, I wish I could believe that. I looked at him and said, "You will. Someday. Maybe sooner than you think." Weeks later, that same man walked into the shelter, sober, clean, ready to start over. We found him a job, a small apartment, a second chance, and one evening he came to me and said, "Michael, you saved my life." I shook my head. "No, David, you saved your own. I just handed you the match and you lit the fire." That's the thing about redemption, it's contagious. When you rise, you lift others with you. But there's one more part of this story. One I've never told anyone publicly before. The part that taught me what real wealth truly means. 2 years after inheriting my father's fortune, I discovered something unexpected. His company, the one that made all the money, was involved in unethical practices before he died. Hidden contracts, unpaid workers, false reports. My lawyers told me I could quietly sell everything and walk away rich, but I couldn't. I remembered his last words. Use it to heal, not to hate. So I decided to rebuild his company from scratch the right way. I sold off half the assets, paid every unpaid worker, and turned the rest into a social enterprise. Businesses that employed the homeless and funded shelters. People called me crazy. "You're giving away millions," they said. But I wasn't losing money. I was gaining peace because I finally understood something money can't teach you. That happiness doesn't come from what you own. It comes from what you give. One evening, I stood outside the shelter watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Daniel, the lawyer who first found me, walked up beside me. "You've done well, Michael," he said. "Your father would be proud," I smiled. "I hope so. But more than that, I hope he'd be at peace." He nodded, and for a long moment we just stood there in silence. The wind carried the faint laughter of children playing nearby, kids whose parents had once lived on the streets. And I thought, this is what legacy truly looks like. Not wealth, not power, but lives changed because you chose to care. Sometimes late at night I still think about that freezing evening outside the gas station, the night a stranger called my name. What if I had walked away? What if I hadn't believed him? One moment, one question, "Are you Michael?" changed everything. That's why I tell people, never underestimate the power of one moment. One act of kindness, one decision to keep going, one stranger who sees you when no one else does. It can rewrite your entire story. And maybe you're sitting here today, listening to my words, feeling lost. Maybe you've been betrayed, broken, left behind. Maybe you've lost faith, in people, in love, even in yourself, but listen to me. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are the possibility of something greater. Life will break you, yes. It will throw storms your way. Take things you thought you couldn't live without. But if you can survive the breaking, the rebuilding will be beautiful, because every scar you carry is proof that you didn't give up. When I was sleeping under that bridge, I thought my story was over. But what I didn't know was that it was only beginning. Sometimes God doesn't change your situation because He's trying to change you. First, I learned that losing everything isn't the end. It's the start of discovering who you really are, and maybe you don't need a miracle worth $47 million to turn your life around. Maybe your miracle is already waiting. In a person, a moment, a chance you haven't seen yet. I once read that broken crayons still color. And it's true. You can still create beauty from the pieces left of you. So if you're standing in your own storm right now, I want you to remember this. Don't curse the rain. It's washing away what's not meant for you. Don't hate the fire, it's forging your strength. And don't fear the fall, because that's where you learn to rise. I don't know where life will take me next, but I do know this. The man who once had nothing now has everything that truly matters: purpose, peace, and the power to help others find their light. And when people ask me, Michael, how did you do it? How did you survive all that pain? I smile and say, I didn't just survive it. I used it. Because pain, my friends, can either be your prison or your passport. And I chose the latter. So tonight, as I stand here before you, I want to leave you with one truth that took me years to learn. Your value isn't measured by what you've lost. It's revealed by what you rise from. When I was homeless, I thought I was forgotten. But I wasn't. I was being prepared. Prepared to become the man who could handle the blessing, the pain, and the purpose that came after. So if life ever brings you to your knees, don't stay there. Look up, because that's where miracles begin. My name is Michael. I was broken, betrayed, and forgotten. But today I am proof that sometimes the fall is just the beginning of your greatest rise. And maybe one day when someone asks you, are you your name? It won't just be a question. It'll be your moment. The moment everything changes.